Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Steven Universe Retrospectives. And today we're going to be discussing episodes 13 and 14 of Steven Universe, So Many Birthdays, and Lars and the Cool Kids. Let's start with So Many Birthdays, and in this episode we learn that the gems are a bit old. You see, in this episode, Stephen learns that the gems are at least a few hundred, at least 100 or so years old, maybe more so. How he discovers this information is he and the gems were combing through Amethyst's room because she had a 5-year-old burrito in there that was starting to stink up the temple, and among her junk, Stephen found a picture of Garnet, Amethyst, Pearl, and his mom kind of posing in old-timey pilgrim clothes, and, well, Garnet punching a shark. When he questions about it, they mention that they actually did pose to the picture and that they really were in an old-timey pilgrim setting. Like, that's when the picture was actually done. And as a result, Steven's just like, when Steven hears this, he's honestly amazed because, well, he thinks it makes him immortal. Now, the gems do state that they're not really immortal. That while they don't age, they can still get hurt and potentially killed under the right circumstances, but yeah, they don't age the way humans do, or if at all. Steven, however, thinks this is amazing. Like, wow, they're this old. That must mean they have so many they must have how many candles would they put on their birthdays? But the gems admit that they don't really do birthdays. It's not really their way, which Steven finds outrageous, so he opts to throw each of them a birthday party to celebrate. Unfortunately, though, as Steven gets into doing the parties, the gems themselves don't really take to them. Amethyst seems to be the one that gets most into it, but she gets disappointed when during a pinata smacking, she wound up hitting it so hard and flew into the ocean, and then got disappointed when she learned there was candy inside. Pearl is just not getting into any of the birthday antics that Steven's doing as he tries to be a clown, and, well, she's not getting his jokes. And Garnet, well, for her, he tried to do these little kazoo racing with these tiny cars and actual kazoos, and, well, the cars are made for, like, babies, and so it's not really something that Steven or the gems can partake in. And so while the gems do try to let Steven down and say, look, we're sorry, we're sorry, but this seems like kid stuff, it starts to kind of cause Steven to get into an existential crisis and kind of walk off to kind of mull everything over. Unfortunately, though, this mulling over has some unfortunate side effects, as while Steven is thinking everything over, thinking, I'm not a kid anymore, I gotta start acting like a man, his gem starts to glow, and he begins aging, little by little. First, we see him turn into an awkward teenager as he goes to an arcade to have some fun. Then, as he opts that if he's a man, he's got to have a real man's job, he grows into an adult. Then, after he buys a shirt for what he thinks is an actual job, which is funny, it says official surf hunk, or official beach hunk. He then goes to the donut shack, which is actually called the Big Donut because their sign is a giant donut on the top of the store, and which caused him to age up even more. And when he goes inside, Lars and Sadie see him, and they don't recognize him as Steven. And the thing is, Steven was not aware of him slowly aging up. And so when they point it out to him, he, of course, is just kind of upset and angry, thinks they're making fun of him, until he sees his reflection and realizes, holy shit, I'm getting older, I gotta find a way to fix this. And so he thinks he needs to have a reverse birthday, which, when he asks to be put in his birthday suit, which I'll explain after I'm done with talking about the plot, it causes him to get chased out, but as he runs out, he ends up getting a crick in his back, which causes him to fall over, and unfortunately he's still aging. Thankfully, Lion manages to find Steve and bring him back to the gems, who, upon seeing him, are absolutely horrified. Steven relays that he thinks he has to do a reverse birthday, but the usual antics don't seem to be working. If anything, they're causing Steven to get more and more distant and age further, which is a bad thing because, well, if he ages too much, he'll eventually age to death. And the gems, unfortunately, are kind of having a rough time processing this, as they try to repeat the same activities that Steven did during the day, but again, they're not working as much, and their continued grief is causing them to act irrationally. When Pearl tries to do the same goofy antics, she's crying too much to actually even make a joke. And when Garnet tries to go close to Steven, her response to try and save him is to violently shake him. As a result of this, the gems actually start bickering with one another, but Steven ends up seeing this, and it causes him to actually get up, yell at them, and actually age younger into an adult, from a senior citizen to an average adult. The Gems at this point realize that his aging is affected by his mood and that his existential crisis is responsible for this, so they're able to talk Steven down enough so that so they tell him, look, you have to think like yourself again, kind, considerate, and only occasionally annoying. After all, you were the one that threw all these parties for us. Only someone that would care would actually do all that. And the Gems and Steven, upon hearing this, it does manage to eventually age him down until he's back to his proper age again. Although it's clear he hasn't done it completely, as his legs are still huge. Bottom line, though, he's back to normal, and that's where the episode ends, which leads us to the next episode, Lars and the Cool Kids. In this case, the aforementioned Cool Kids are these 3 teenagers that inhabit Beach City. One is a girl named Jenny, whose sister works at the pizza shop that we saw in an earlier episode, Fish Stew Pizza, which, okay, she technically works there too, but she doesn't really do a lot of work, as we see in later episodes. A young aspiring DJ by the name of Sour Cream, who is actually the brother to Onion, and a kid named Buck Dewey, the son of the mayor of Beach City, well, Mayor Dewey, so to speak. And pretty much just 1 second, please. Sorry about that puppy emergency. Anyway, as I was saying, Jenny, who works at the Fish Stew Pizza, whose family owns the place, but she doesn't do any work. Sour Cream, who's Onion's brother and a aspiring DJ, and Buck Dewey, son of Mayor Dewey of Beach City. Pretty much, they're just this trio of cool kids that, well, Lars of the Big Donut wants to get in with. The problem is, he doesn't know how to be cool. Lars is lame, very lame, and is strictly poser material. As such, Steven sees Lars trying to get the attention of the trio, and rather than playing it Lars' way, just posing around waiting for the trio to notice him, he just goes right up to them and speaks to them, which actually does help him get to open up to these kids, and, well, because Lars told Steven how he wanted to get in with them, well, Steven invites Lars to come and hang out with them, something Lars is kind of embarrassed about, but he rolls with. It's an in, so they just kind of hang out. As such, Steven, Lars, and the cool kids end up taking the delivery van for Fish Stew Pizza and just kind of go out for a drive, going to a place that's called, I think, Dead Man's Lake, I think. I forgot what it was called, but because they think that that's a good place they can hang out. There's just one problem. The lake's a bit off limits. You see, earlier in the episode, Steven and the Gems had gone to that lake because at the lake was this strange magical moss that Steven's mom, Rose, had been taking care of, and every year she would go and tend to the moss and keep it alive. The thing is, though, the moss was originally located on a hill, and it moved, and now it's down by the lake. And unfortunately, because of its magical nature, it consumes literally any living thing it touches. So unfortunately, it's a danger to humans and various other wildlife. As such, the Gems decided to cordon off the area that it had gone to with the intention of trying to find a more permanent solution later to try and get it back on the hill where it was being tended to. However, where they've gone is Dead Man's Lake, or Dead Man's Bluff, or whatever it's called. And as a result of this, Steven has to try and direct the cool kids away from the bluff, but them being dumbass teenagers don't really listen to him, and instead just chalk his warnings up to cowardice because Steven's the youngest of the group. Sorry about the shaking. Chindi is right there. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that. Xander was being an ass, plus I figured I needed a light for this. Anyway, as I was saying, yeah, the group just kind of chalks Steven's warnings up to him being cowardly, and thus they all go take a dive in the lake where the moss is, which unfortunately causes all of them to be subsumed by it. While Steven and Lars do try pulling the moss off of them, unfortunately because... Sorry about that. That's Chindi. That is Chindi Regina, that being a little impatient. While they do keep trying to pull the moss off of them, it just keeps growing back wherever they pull it off, and unfortunately it's completely covering the kids, and it's clear from their gasps that when they do so get them off, that they aren't exactly getting oxygen while under these things. As such, Steven decides that he and Lars need to get these kids to the hill so that they can try and get this stuff off. But when the instant Lars learns that the moss was something that Steven's mom created, he is quick to point the finger at Steven and say this is all his fault. Him and his weird mom. What was he thinking? Blah, blah, blah. This actually does cause Steven to lash out because throughout the whole episode, Lars was trying to distance himself from Steven, and even whenever Steven acted sensible around the teenagers, he told Steven to cram it. And so when he tells Steven this is all his fault, Steven rightfully snaps at him and says, what do you even know about my mom? I don't even know my mom. But I know one thing, she saw beauty in everything, including moss like this and jerks like you. Which does manage to shut Lars up and ultimately get him to cooperate. However, so as such, they get the kids into the back of the pizza van, and thankfully, while Lars can't drive stick, he can at least keep the car on the road, so he and Steven do manage to get them to the hill, but unfortunately by this point the moss kept growing till it started covering the van, and unfortunately Steven and Lars. However, just as they're subsumed by it, they did manage to thankfully get to the hill, and once the sun hits them, the moss actually ends up blooming into several rose petals. As a result of this, Steven, Lars, and the cool kids are freed from it. And the kids actually do see the view from the hill and think, wow, this is beautiful. And Steven does end up chalking the view up to Lars driving them there, so he's able to get some credit. And the episode ends with Sour Cream thinking he can rave to this view. So, yeah, overall, what do I think of these episodes? Well, first let's talk about So Many Birthdays. In that episode's case, it's another little bit of lore drop for the show itself, as this episode finally ends up giving us more hints towards the gems and their personal histories, especially since this episode reveals that the gems are, like I said, a lot older than we think they are, as it's clear that they've been on Earth for a very, very long time, longer even than Steven's lifespan. They didn't just come here in like the last 30 years. They've been here for hundreds of years doing their thing. So it does kind of give a bigger air to them as characters, as it does add a bit more mystery to them, what their stories are, how are they like this, etc. But it still also adds to the whole magical aspect of them, as when you learn that they don't share a lot. That this is another aspect they don't share with humans, that they really are not human. The fact, especially since they don't age. It does still, of course, they still leave things a little ambiguous how their biology works, but that's for future episodes to talk about. The point is, it does still offer a nice little window into them, especially when it reveals that as gems, they are kind of immune to certain things that humans are vulnerable to, like how humans can apparently age up and die, yet they're always the same age no matter what. Or how they still can get hurt, but not through the same conventional means as humans, as Amethyst does end up eating the 5-year-old burrito and does get food sickness from it, but all it does is just cause her to nearly keel over or lurch or whatever, and thankfully not get killed. It's causing her to get really, really sick. But as for that's the episode. It's also a nice little tidbit to showcase more of Steven and his abilities. As in this episode, when it's pointed out by the gems that Steven's antics on the birthday are a bit too childish, it does get Steven to kind of rethink his whole shtick when it comes to birthdays. Oh, stop that, Chindi. She's a puppy, and she's needy. And as a result of this, you see Steven aging up and down depending on his mood set. It's a nice little tidbit, as it not only showcases a negative aspect of his powers, as they are directly they're directly affected by his mindset, but again also hints at more of his powers, as they're directly hinted at his mindset. And unfortunately, because of Steven's mood, it is having an effect on him physically. The psychological aspects of his powers begin having repercussions on him physically. And as a result of this, whenever he thinks he's feeling old or outdated or out of place, this gem begins changing him to reflect that. Case in point, when he starts thinking that maybe everything he's doing is kid stuff, maybe he's too old for that, his gem shifts him into a teenage form. When he thinks, okay, I've got to start acting mature and adult and act like an adult now, that's when he turns into a mature adult. When he starts thinking he's too old for everything, that's when he gets a little older. But when he's filled with the existential dread that he will continue getting older and outlive everything, it's what starts causing him to get older and older by the second. It's actually kind of effed up in a way when you stop and think about it, as essentially it's a negative aspect of his powers that does show that actually does come up in later episodes. Various other episodes throughout the series do showcase the correlation between Steven's mood and mindset, and how his powers turn that mindset from a psychological impact to a physical one. And yeah, spoiler warning, it doesn't always go well. This is actually this is the first aspect, but again, the fact that his mood is having an effect on him also is a nice way of hinting how his powers work, as in this case, you do see him changing and altering based on his negative mindset, which again does well, which Chindi is determined to make this all about her. Anyway, like I said, it's a nice way of showcasing more of his mindset and how of the mindset and what goes into his powers. Again, from this we do see more of Steve. We do kind of see it reflected more in Steven's abilities. Yeah, again, this is a negative aspect of it as we see him kind of aging up and getting worse. But on the upside, we do see the positive aspects of this later as we see from Steven's emotions, him learning to control more of his abilities. So again, it's a double-edged sword. Again, if Steven's not in the right mindset, it can have a negative impact on him physically, especially since, like I said, he almost aged himself to death. But on the plus side, it is a nice hint at where things can go, how his powers actually work. So I'll give it credit, I like that. On top of that, we still get some nice funny antics with the various birthdays, and Steven trying to get the gems into it, but them not really going for it. One of my favorite things was that he gave each of the gems like a crown and cape, and so they wore it for each of their birthdays, and since Garnet was last, well, she's the one that decried them. The next time we see her, when she's helping Amethyst and Pearl clean up, she's still wearing it. And when they tell her, "Hey, you don't have to wear that anymore," she says, "It makes me feel important." It's just kind of funny. Nice little bits of humor like that, or nice little bits of humor like that are things that I love from Garnet. So I think that's funny. I'll give it that. Otherwise, though, the episode is still just pretty good. Again, does well and help in further establishing the stuff with the gems, showcasing more of how Steven's abilities work, both positively and negatively. Overall, I think it's a good episode. As for Lars and the Cool Kids, okay, I'm just going to say this right now. Lars-centered episodes are not the best ones. But thankfully, this is one of the least egregious examples of it, as it's one of the first episodes that actually features Lars as a central character. On the one hand, one of Lars's major character flaws is that he's a poser trying to get in with the cool kids. And unfortunately, because of that mindset, it prompts Lars to act, well, stupid. And that's showcased as early as the beginning of this episode, when we see him, instead of going to talk with the cool kids, he's just casually standing around, not even acknowledging them, hoping that his mere cool aura will get their attention, which, yeah, it's dumb. And throughout the whole episode, you see more of that negativity and stupidity have come out in Lars as he and Steven are hanging out with Jenny, Sour Cream, and Buck. And unfortunately, as Steven continues acting like himself, Lars keeps telling him to stop it, knock it off, and just not do all this. But what makes it better, though, is that Lars is continually knocked down as he keeps trying to get in with the cool kids, essentially be the kid that he thinks they want to hang out with, and it keeps blowing up in his face, which is a little amusing, but also majorly annoying, because it's just so dumb. Now, again, they do showcase that this is a negative thing, especially as at one point in the episode, Steven does call him out on it, and after that, he does seem to learn his lesson. So I'll cut it some slack for that, as that's one of the reasons why I think this is the least egregious examples of a Lars episode. Because in this case, Lars actually does seem to get it through his head that his attitude is actually hindering him rather than being a boon like he thought it was. And as a result, it does actually lead to some good resolution, as by the end of the episode, Steven does actually vouch for Lars and does seem to get him in good with the cool kid. So I like that. I like that at least. But I think other aspects of the episode that I like are that we get to see more of the populace of Beach City, especially with meeting Jenny, Sour Cream, and Buck. As one of the things that I do genuinely like about them is that while they are meant to fit into the stereotypical dumbass teenager stereotype, they don't entirely fit into that. One of the things that I like about the episode is that when Steven goes to genuinely talk with them, how he gets on in their good graces is by being himself. He goes to talk to them. He goes to say, "Hi, my name is Steven." He shares his interests. He actually agrees with them, engages them in conversation, encourages them when need be. I like that. And yeah, while they still act like dumbasses because, well, despite the police tape, they go into a gorge that's covered with man-eating moss, at the same time, it's kind of refreshing to see them both fit into the dumbass teen stereotype, but also defying it in several others, as they actually do act responsibly in certain areas, as Jenny tells everyone that they want to get moving, they all have to buckle up. As we see Sour Cream talk about how trying to act all cool when they pass by the arcade and say, "Oh, I played all the games like 3 billion times," and then later admitting, "Actually, I'm just exaggerating to sound cool." And then even Buck stating how his dad never kissed him a lot when he was a kid, and so while Lars tries sympathizing with him, he says, "Actually, it was my lack of kisses that made me the man I am today." So it's kind of funny that they're both defying and yet also firmly sticking to the dumbass teen stereotype. So I like that. It's amusing, and it's again a kind of a fresh breath of air to not see them acting like complete jackasses to the main character because, hey, we're the cool kids. We don't do rules or responsibility. I like that. It's refreshing. On top of that, one of the aspects of the episode that I really do like, the stuff with Steven. It's again another hint at his character. As when the moss subsumed the cool kids and he and Lars were trying to help them, when Lars yelled at Steven to try and blame him for all the stupid shit that's going on with him not fitting in with the cool kids and thinking that Steven was weird, Steven lashes out at him, and rightfully so. After all, Lars claims that the reason that this all went wrong is because Steven was the weird one. Steven was the one doing all this. It's all his fault that all this went wrong. It's all because of his weird parents, weird family, weird mom. It's just like, even I looked at that scene and thought, "F you, Lars." Like because Steven in the episode, like I said, was getting in with the cool kids. He talked with them like they were human beings. He actually supported them, talked with them like he was their friends. While Lars was just constantly trying to fit into whatever niche he felt that they wanted. And as such, when Steven is called out by this, saying it was all because of you and your weird mom, Steven rightfully yells at Lars and says, "What do you know about my mom? I don't know. I didn't even know my mom." It's a nice, and when he does this, you see tears in his eyes. It's a small little moment, but it's a nice little hint at Steven's mindset. While Steven himself has usually been a happy-go-lucky kid throughout this show, there have been moments that you've seen him kind of crack. Now, normally these moments are reserved for stuff where he's in high intense situation and he starts panicking or getting worried, etc. But this one, you actually see you see one emotion you don't see with him very often: anger. He yells at Lars and talks about how he never knew his mom. And the things he describes about his mom are only things that were told to him by the gems. Like when they said, oh, Rose cared for all living things. And yet, Steven only knows about Rose through the stories that have been told to him. And all of them are like these big stories about how majestic, how great she was, how awesome she was. Now take that And imagine growing up with that mindset, knowing that your mother was the leader of the Crystal Gems, of this superpowered group, did all these amazing things, and now you have her powers. Imagine what must go through your head. And we see just what kind of emotions you would be feeling. Even if ultimately you were raised in a supportive, loving home, there's going to be some kind of pressure there. And we see that pressure pop out briefly when Steven calls out Lars for being a jackass. When he says, I didn't even know my mom. It's just like you can see a little bit of the pressure there. The ideal of wanting to try and be like her, especially when he says afterwards, she saw the beauty in everything, in this moss, in jerks like you, and then he tries to bring the moss to the hill. It looks like in some way that he's kind of living in her shadow, whether he wants to or not. Not helped by the fact that, as he said, he never knew her. He's constantly told things about her, but by nature of how he exists, he has never gotten the chance to know her. It's actually pretty tragic in a sense, and like I said, just that one little snippet it kind of helped showcase more of what's going on under the surface with him. I liked stuff like that. I liked that, and it's a nice little hint of what's really going on under the surface of this kid. So kudos on that. It's a nice little moment. It's a nice little blink and you'll miss it moment. So I like that. And again, like I said, one of the reasons that I do think this works again as a Lars episode is while Lars does continually act like a jackass and a poser throughout the episode, by the end, he does seem to learn his lesson and does seem to acknowledge that his attitude was a negative one and a detriment. And ultimately, by stepping aside and letting Steven take charge and do his own thing, do things go his way? Does he get in with the cool kids? Actually, he manages to save their lives, and Steven manages to turn things around for him. It's nice. I like it. It's just that while it works in this first episode, later episodes don't exactly stick to this moral. I'll get to that later when I encounter another Lars episode, but needless to say, the lesson doesn't stick. And that's what I find kind of annoying with Lars' character. I'll get more into it in a future vlog, but like I said, for now, in this episode, I think it works because, again, it shows Lars being a dumbass teenager poser, trying to get in with the group, Steven getting in by just being himself, them working together, but them still being idiot teenagers, and ultimately through Steven just doing his own thing and actually just trying to be a good person, do things actually go well for Lars in the end. So, yeah, overall, I think both episodes are good. I think Lars and the Cool Kids is a little bit better by virtue of the character growth with Lars and Steven lashing out, and again, the breath of fresh air, the teenagers not being completely the typical dumbass teenagers. Well, again, with so many birthdays, I think it's a nice fun episode which showcases Steven trying to go closer to the gems, while also hinting at some of the darker, while also showcasing more that also establishing their whole aging thing, how they don't age, and they're much older than they actually look, and showcasing much more of the positive and the negative stuff with Steven's powers as we see his mood causing him to continually age. So yeah. Overall, both episodes are good. Definitely entertaining in their own ways. Adds lore wherever they want to. Adds character where they need to. Overall, I think they're just good episodes. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson. And tune in next week as I am sure Chindi will try and come in and steal the show once more. So until then, I hope you have a good night and take care.